You ready, son?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay.
So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Penn community. This evening, we have Mr. Cliff Tolson, which is president of Tolson Enterprises. He's currently the owner and CEO of Tolson Enterprises, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business specializing in small business certifications. He is retired from Small Business Administration, which is SBA, after 31 years of service, held several executive level positions with SBA. And what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Mr. Tolson so we can go through the 8A presentation.
Okay, Sonia, thank you so much, and good evening to everybody. Glad y'all could join us, and hopefully this will be a good conversation and as we go through it. To start the presentation, we're going to start with a couple of commercials. The first of which is up on the screen right now. Tolson Enterprises, again, started in 1995, and our primary business is small business certifications, but we also do business coaching and a lot of contract compliance reviews and services. Just to highlight that a little bit for companies that get government contracts and it's their first time and they can't navigate themselves through that maze, we will hold their hands through the process so that they can stay in good standings as a prime contractor or as a sub contractor. Next. This one we're going to skip because Sonia was so kind to give us a nice introduction with a little bit of redundancy. Stayed with SBA over 31 years, and now we are in the private sector. Tonight, we're going to try to stay on script and give you an overview of the 8A program, its purpose, some of the eligibility requirements, and give you some samples of the application documents required, and then we'll go into Q&A. And for those of you who are legal scholars, the legal reference for the 8A program is 13 CFR Part 124. And if we have anybody in the audience from Maryland want to throw out a shout to Hearn J. Mitchell, a former congressman from Maryland, who is considered the father and the godfather of the 8A program. And just about every other small business, the impact that Perrin had on developing the 8A certification program looms large, because just about every small business set-aside certification program was modeled after the 8A program, just FYI for you guys. Okay, we got Rod up on the screen.
Ooh, what happened? What happened to the screen, Sonia? Okay, I think we got a little technical problem going on here.
Her call may have dropped because it just went blank.
Oh, did it? Okay. Okay, let me
Would you like for me to go ahead and take
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
controls and
yeah, go ahead and take
let me
control.
know when you want me to go ahead to the next screen?
Yes, please. Yes, because
Okay.
the system won't allow me to do so.
So we apologize about having technical.
That's
problems.
okay. It happens. Number 5, Sonia, yes, right there.
That's LaRonda.
So what is this thing called 8A program? It is a SBA business development program for small disadvantaged businesses that have at least 51% ownership of their companies, and it is controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. I'm going to speak in a lot of detail about being controlled by a socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, because this is very, very important. In fact, it reigns supreme in terms of being eligible for this program. Now, in the business, the 8A program is considered the granddaddy of them all of the small business certifications. As an example, one of the benefits is that you can receive sole source contracts up to $4 million without competition. I need to underscore that, up to $4 million without competition. And if you're a manufacturer, the sum number goes up to 6.5. What that means in the real world is that if you establish good working relationships with a federal government or military buyer, you can close a deal in any social or business setting. And the only thing that has to follow, obviously, is the paperwork. And you don't have to compete for these contracts. For the last 10 years, and the numbers have been steadily going up, individuals that are socially and economically disadvantaged, i.e. minorities, have benefited from in excess of $80 billion in contract support. That's a huge, huge number. Huge number. Next slide, please. Now, who is eligible for this program? The first thing that reigns again supreme importance is individuals who are socially and economically disadvantaged. And I'm going to define both of those momentarily. And I'll let you read the screen. I don't want to just talk you to death, but these are the minimum eligibility criteria that you must bring to the table in order to be a successful applicant. And one of the things I'm going to highlight on this list is that SBA requires that you've been in business for a minimum period of 2 consecutive years before you can apply for the 8A program. They want you to bring a business performance history to the table. And that's in part to avoid having these businesses that are fronts, that just establish themselves overnight just to take advantage of the program benefits. Next screen, please. You remember I said that the applicants must be socially disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged. This is super, super important. Translation, individuals that are considered socially disadvantaged are people of color, people that with a history of being discriminated against. And if you are a citizen of the United States, the history of the United States is enriched in people of color being discriminated against. And so by default, businesses that are majority owned by people of color are automatically by law determined to be socially disadvantaged. And because this is a federal government program, it cannot discriminate against non-minorities. People that own businesses that are non-minorities can still take advantage of the 8A program, but they have to prove that they've had experiences of being discriminated against. And it does not have to be the traditional types of discrimination. It can be, for an example, that you are a member of an association that has all males, for an example, And if you are a female that owns a business and the majority of the members of a association are males and they get the majority of the contracts because they network, you can prove almost automatically that if all of the contracts are going to the male members of that organization, that you can prove as a white female, for an example, that you are socially disadvantaged because you don't get any of the contracts and all of your white male peers benefit from them. Next screen, please. These are the examples of individuals that are determined to be socially disadvantaged. You don't even have to prove it again. Black Americans, Hispanic, Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, and other designated groups. There's a long list, but these are the primary groups of people that have been predetermined to be socially disadvantaged and make you automatically, in this aspect, eligible for the 8A program. Next. Now we transition to who is economically disadvantaged. And the next several slides, we're going to spend some time on this, and hopefully it won't be boring. But in general, economically disadvantaged individuals are socially disadvantaged individuals whose ability to compete in the free enterprise marketplace has been impaired due to diminished capital and credit opportunities as compared to other small business owners in the same similar line of business that are not socially disadvantaged. Translation: to be minimally eligible to be economically disadvantaged, you lack access to capital. Next, please. And considering lack of access to capital, SBA will consider, one, your income for the last 3 years and your personal net worth. And any individual who exceeds any one of those thresholds for personal income or net worth or total assets will generally be deemed to not have access to credit and capital, will not be economically disadvantaged by definition. Next. On this slide, we're just going to summarize it and say and deal with just income. Your average income for the last 3 years prior to applying for an 8A cannot exceed $350,000. Now, making $350,000 is a good thing, but it's not so much a good thing if you want to apply for the 8A program, realizing that this is a program for socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. So if you are making a high salary, it's going to be difficult to claim that you're economically disadvantaged. Now, the $350,000 is the maximum salary that you can earn to be eligible for this program. The normal range, without it being contested, is people who have salaries of about $120,000. The lower the salary, the better you are positioned to be a good candidate for the 8A program. Next slide. This one deals with your personal net worth. It cannot exceed $750,000. The good thing is, before you panic, is that it excludes your primary residence and your retirement incomes or your retirement accounts. So it excludes those two major things, your primary residence and all of your retirement accounts. Again, your your personal net worth cannot exceed $750,000. Next, please. Now we're going to talk about your total net worth. We said your personal net worth cannot exceed $750,000, but your total net worth cannot exceed $4 million, and that includes your personal assets and your business assets. And again, the only thing that is excluded is your primary residence and your retirement accounts. Next. Now we're going to talk a little bit about business ownership. You have to be the majority owner of your business to meet the minimum eligibility criteria. And the minimum ownership percentage is 51%. You cannot own any less than 51% of a business enterprise and be eligible for the 8A program. And ownership, secondly, ownership must be direct. What I mean by that is that the ownership of the company cannot be through a trust or a corporation. You have to have direct line ownership to the company. Next, please. Now, just because you are the majority owner of your company doesn't necessarily mean that you control the operations of the business, and control is also a key requirement. You must demonstrate that you're in charge of the strategic planning of the business and that you run the day-to-day operations. So you just cannot be the owner of record and not assume responsibility for setting the policy and the direction of the company and manage the day-to-day operations. That's required as well. Next slide, please. Now, before we get to questions, the Q&A, I want to go over a couple of things. One is the summary of what I've just shared with you, and I'm going to just keep quiet for a minute and allow you to read the screen. This is a summary of some of the 8A or the major 8A eligibility requirements. So just continue on the next page, so you can flip to the next page as well. Okay, next slide. Now we're going to look at some of the required documents. If you have plans to become an 8A applicant, these are some of the documents that are going to be required that you have to submit to the SBA. And it's continued on the second page. Second slide, I should say, Sonia. Okay, now that you've taken all that in, now we're open for Q&A. Next slide, please. Whatever questions that you've had, we can now entertain them.
Okay. Mr. Tolson, I think for everyone on the call, this is great information because, a lot of us, have our challenges where we don't understand how to actually, navigate, the 8A space or the 7A space and stuff like that. But in all honesty, going back over some of the last part of the slide, Rhonda, of some of the things that, that's asked of you, as far as your net worth and how much money you can have here and there. I think some of that we might need to just cover because like even 4 million in assets and stuff like that, does everybody totally understand, what that means or any questions that you have for Mr. Tolson to make sure that, there's a clear understanding before, we get off the call today. So I want to make sure that everybody just asks those questions. I mean, this is a place where you can ask the questions, and get real answers, from real subject matter experts like Mr. Tolson. So please, by all means, ask any question that you need to ask. So Q&A now, don't be bashful.
Right, and as a follow-up, there is absolutely no dumb question, I'm telling you, because
Exactly.
you would have not extended the invitation to me if you were a subject matter expert. So get all the questions out, please.
Right. Okay, that's a short. So Ryan has a question.
Yeah, my question is, when there's multiple owners of the business, do they both need to meet the threshold of net worth and income, or be below the 750 and below the 350 average adjusted gross income for the previous 3 years? Or if one of them is above that, does that render the business ineligible? Do they both have to meet the requirements, or just the majority owner?
Excellent question. Only the majority owner. And strategically, I will tell you that if you're in a partner situation, and I want to use that word again, strategic, if you're in a partner situation, the majority owner should be the only applicant for the 8A certification. All of the partners should not apply. And let me give you a tree tidbit and tell you why. Again, let me say that one, only the majority owner needs to meet the financial threshold. And two, the majority owner should be the only applicant for the 8A certification, because your other partners may want to apply for 8A in a future date, a future time, when if they spur off and start their own companies, they may want to apply for 8A as well. But if they apply for 8A the same time or be a part of the application when you submit yours, they lose their eligibility requirement to become an 8A firm if they start a company down the road, 5, 10, 15 years later. So again, the only person that has to meet the eligibility requirements is the majority owner.
One more question before you move on, and thank you for your response, is I've heard that the 8A certification, it has set-asides and advantages that come with it when you have the certification. But I've heard that also other certifications, say for instance, if you have a veteran business or some other eligibilities, they might be more effective and beneficial for your business than the 8A. Do you agree, or you think the 8A is one of the more effective and powerful certifications you can get?
You're asking some very, very good questions. Some very seasoned questions, and I want to give you a kudo on that. I mentioned earlier that the 8A program is the granddaddy of them all. But in effect, whatever certification that a potential procurement activity is asking for, that becomes the most important certification in your toolbox. For an example, you have 8A, let's fast forward. You have 8A in your toolbox. You have veteran certification in your toolbox. And every federal government agency that you engage will only hire you if you have your veteran certification. Then all of a sudden that becomes the most important certification, period. And 8A becomes a non-factor. So it's whatever one the procurement activity is asking for, that becomes by default the most important one.
Okay. Derek?
Great presentation, Mr. Tolson.
Thank you, sir.
And a couple questions for you. Are there local advocates that will help to advocate for you as you apply for your 8A certification? And I ask that because I've heard, some different stories about it taking long or people not responding. So I wondered if there were any type of local advocates or maybe even minority business advocates that would advocate for you to kind of speed that process along?
Well, no pun intended, but we are very good at that, in that role. Tolson Enterprises.
Okay.
In the real world, there are no such organizations that will advocate for you. And it does, all those things you've heard around the water cooler are accurate, but it's generally attributed to, particularly taking a long time to get your 8A certification, is that one, the applicant does not respond fully to the questions or the requirements being asked of him or her. And secondly, SBA has all new staff. By law, they're supposed to process your application in 90 days. On average, it takes maybe a year or two. They got all new staff, and they are absolutely overwhelmed in terms of application requests. So if you come full circle again, is that when you are applying and you respond to the questions fully and completely, generally that can cut down significantly on the time frame and you getting your 8A certification. But and part B is, no, there are no advocate organizations can help speed that up. But I will share this with you. Once you are totally convinced and you're frustrated because SBA is not being responsive to you, one of the most effective tools that you have is your congressman or congressperson.
Mm-hmm.
By law, they have to respond to them, I think, in 10 or 15 days.
Okay.
So they will get you an answer, but only use it as a whole card when you really need it.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And then my other question was, during your presentation, you mentioned different set-asides or contracts that are specifically for 8A participants where you don't have much competition. Did you mean competition in relation to only other 8A applicants, or like, is there a database where it says like anybody that any 8A that qualifies for this particular service or product will automatically get this?
No, we're talking about a limited working environment, because the only people who are eligible for the contracts as an 8A applicant that you would be going for would be other 8A firms. And the fact that contracts are available to you on a non-compete basis, and you being the recipient of such, is due to how you develop your working relationships with the contracting and procurement officer. Simply stated.
Mhm.
That's what puts you out front.
Gotcha. All right. Thank
Yeah.
you, sir.
Jesse Vaughn,
Good evening, Mr. Woods.
how are you, sir?
Thank you. Good. Thank you for the invite. Mr. Tulsa, thanks for the information. I had a question. When there's a multi-headed monster and let's say a married couple owns 60% of the organization, do they have to transfer shares to one of the owners, or can they apply together?
You gotta, unfortunately, you gotta make a decision in your household. Somebody has to be the majority owner, and the minimum percentage is 51%. I encounter that all the time. I hate to give you that comforting reply, but if y'all collectively own 60%, there, by definition, there is no majority owner.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Gotcha.
that's probably not the answer you wanted to hear, but
No,
actually
this
is.
stay, Mr. Tulsa, you know, this is where you got to keep it real and honest, right?
It
Dorian.
actually is what I wanted to hear. I was asking it for someone who might ask that question.
okay.
I know what to
Right.
do in my household.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Jesse. Dorian.
Hey there. Thanks again for the information. Question. At times, I do get shared links to maybe government contracts or databases, and maybe this is a dovetail on the previous one. Is there a place we can see a list of the 8A contracts before we go down the road to make sure there's something in our category?
There is no one collective place for that. Each agency lists them on their websites. And in fact, part of your, that's just the way I talk, part of your strategy even before you become an 8A applicant or choose to apply for the 8A, you should identify by rule a minimum of 3 and no more than 5 agencies that you want to target, and start scouring their websites and sending emails to those. And not only do they list the 8A contracts, they have the point of contacts on their websites. And if you're pretty much convinced that you're going to get your 8A, you should start sending them correspondence and tell them that you have expertise in those particular areas, so they can start to have name recognition. Because if they're advertising 8A contracts or opportunities, they probably already have working partners, 8A working partners. So you want to get your foot in the door to get name recognition, because sometimes they break up those contracts.
Gotcha. Okay. And now I know this is maybe more of an ignorant question, but you know,
No, it
I'm
isn't.
throwing it out here. I've never gone on the road of contracting with the government, and you know, everyone knows the government is huge. So do you have some recommendations? When you mention government agencies, I think of, you know, state, local, federal, the military. Anything else you can kind of give some tips on where to look there?
Yes, but it wouldn't be useful. It depends upon your area of expertise. And then based upon my personal knowledge and or me doing a little bit of homework, I can tell you where the majority of those contracts have been let or awarded for the last 3 to 5 years. And I'm going to put up my contact information in a minute, or Sonia will be so gracious to do that. And you can stay in contact when you get to a certain point and you start to stumble. I can help you out or tell you exactly procedurally how to do it.
Okay. Ms. Johnson.
Awesome. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for this presentation. I previously worked in state government and procurement for the Business Enterprise Program under Governor Pritzker. So wasn't not as educated on the AA program, but in terms of state certification, I wanted to share with my other mentees that for the women businesses, the Women Business Enterprise Network does provide PTAC services. If you get certified through WeBank, that of course is not AA certification, but usually your city and state governments have reciprocity on their certifications, and then you can look in their procurement portals for at least city and state opportunities and make sure that you're registered there. For instance, the state of Illinois has reciprocity with the state of Indiana, and I want to say they were working on Michigan. And so you could get in the procurement portals for all 3 states. So that was a comment. And then my question was, in terms of your thoughts on the procurement portals, since I'm not familiar with AA, does it utilize NAICS codes or NIGP codes? And do those have to be relevant with the procurement of each of those agencies for which you're certified under, the code you're certified under?
Right, there is a direct relevance, but in their procurement listings, they normally just list the opportunities by title and a general description of work, and at the bottom they would have the NAICS code. But whatever work you identify or have interest in, you write on target, it has to be in your primary area of expertise, which is your primary NAICS code.
Okay.
You just can't see something that looks attractive to you and then pursue it and then have no expertise. I'm probably telling you guys the obvious, but it would have to be in your designated area expertise by NAICS code. And NAICS code is an acronym. I think it stands for North Atlantic Industrial Code.
Okay.
North Atlantic Industrial Code. And you have to define your primary area of work through a numerical number that corresponds with your area of expertise. And those are the contracts that you have to, and the federal government will only allow you to focus on. Now, you can go after work in other areas But as an 8A firm, you should really be concentrating on pursuing contracts in your primary area of expertise as defined by your NAC code, which is
Okay.
part of the application process. You have to declare what your primary area of expertise is during the 8A application process.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, put with the rest of the group, at the last NMSDC conference in New Orleans, Secretary Buttigieg did a presentation for us in sharing due to all the new infrastructure dollars that are available to 8A businesses. And so oftentimes, if there are procurements out, those agencies really do want to make sure that the best and the brightest get the opportunity. So if you're having a hard time getting certified and you have seen a procurement you want to participate in, those agencies will also, send a ping over because they want to make sure that you get through the certification process, and as well as Secretary Buttigieg's office, at least as it relates to those opportunities at that agency.
That's a very, very good tidbit because you just triggered my mind on something. Another marketing strategy is, and it requires that you do a little bit of homework. If you're pursuing a contract at an agency for the first time in a semi or total cold call, and they're not responsive to you, if you do your homework and find out that the agencies are not meeting their congressional mandates and that they've had little or no contract activity in your area of expertise in the last year or two, you can mention that to them to urge them to give you a contract. It's a polite way of guerrilla marketing because they have goals. They have congressional goals they must meet. And if they're not meeting them contract-wise in your area of expertise and you do your homework and find that out, when you speak to them, and if the call is not going the way you would like or not in your favor, you can say, look, I can help you to meet your goals. And that will trigger a strong thought in their minds.
There you go. Thanks, Ms. Johnson. Thank you, Ms. Tolson. Kena. Ms. Kelly. You have a
Yeah,
question?
thank you. Yep, I'm here. Thank you, everybody, for this really great informational. During the pandemic, my application kind of was stalled in queue. My application for EDW OSB was stalled in queue for months when I actually got a contract with the Department of Justice. And once that period of performance was over, the Department of Justice's contractor of record notified SBA that I was an EDW OSB, and I became certified immediately. Is there a similar process that we can explore when we get a contract with one of the agencies? Say that we want to be at 8A reputable or 8A qualified, or applications are in queue, and can they then say, well, if they've applied, can they then have us certified immediately through that process?
You're onto something. They don't have the power to get you certified, but it is noteworthy that if your application is in process and you've not received your certification, if there's an agency that wants to give you a contract as soon as you're certified, if you can get the highest ranking person possible from that agency to send a letter to SBA, that would help to nudge the application approval process along. And this lady is using acronyms, and she's talking about a woman-owned certification from the SBA.
It's economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business.
Yes.
But let me just give you guys a little bit about that. That particular socioeconomic group falls under the woman-owned business. And so while it looks like they ought to set aside EDWOSB contracts for EDWOSBs, they don't do it in the same way that they do it for the disabled veterans, because you can have a veteran and then you can have a disabled veteran. It's not the same. What they try to do is rank the WOSB above the EDWOSB, which kind of overshadows us getting those dollars, because oftentimes, especially in my industry, which is ocean transportation, you have companies that have their wives can be the WOSB, the white wives, and they get those particular contracts versus the EDWOSB. So I've really literally had to advocate, and I appreciate some of the feedback from like Ms. Johnson, because I've had to literally write Secretary Buttigieg and go to the Congress and speak with different people to tell them that there's a marked difference between the way they are doling out dollars to WOSB and EDWOSB, and we need to be two different separate categories.
Well, needless to say that one of the other options that you have is once you again have 2 years of performance work history under the woman-owned certification, you may want to consider, and I'm sure you have at that point, is to apply for the 8A program, and then you wouldn't have those headaches. Then
Gotcha.
all contracts worldwide would be available to you without limitation.
Gotcha. I think you appreciate
Worldwide,
that.
not just the United States. I want to say it again, because a lot of people think and assume that once you get 8A, for some reasons that it has territorial boundaries, i.e. in particular the United States. If you get an 8A certification, you have access to contracts worldwide.
I think you might want to say it again. I don't think everybody heard Ms. Thompson.
I heard and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Once you get your 8A, it does
There you go.
not have territorial boundaries. You are eligible for contract opportunities worldwide.
Worldwide. Question. If there was a question asked by Ms. May, Cycle. So if it's a turnaround time, is there a turnaround time? I think that was your question. Is a turnaround time, and there is a face-to-face interview with application?
No face-to-face. What SBA is instituting now is that they're finally doing on-site visits after the fact now, which is something states have been doing for a long time. And I think the VA really introduced that into the application or the certification process.
Okay.
Where they do a virtual, but traditionally they've done on-site visits to make sure that you are in fact have a business and you're operating it.
Got you.
But you use some key words in terms of turnaround time.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned 90 days. Don't define 90 days from the time you submit your application to the time that they're supposed to respond to you. The 90-day clock starts once SBA contacts you and tell you that they have a completed application. Is when the 90-day clock begins, and not when you initially submit your application to the SBA.
Okay. Good question, Ms. May. Ryan, you got a question?
Yeah, so if I saw that part of the documentation requirements, it has to indicate that you have a lack of funds or access to capital. If a company is thinking about applying for a SBA loan or significant loan from a bank, is if they put that ahead of their submission of the 8A application, is that going to basically block the application, or do you need to apply for the certification and then go out and engage with the bank for a loan, is basically what I'm asking.
Applying for any financial assistance that's going to enhance your financial positioning relative to applying for an 8A is not wise. You should get your 8A. You want to present yourself as an 8A applicant as in dire need. If you apply for a loan and you are successful prior to the 8A application, you're in an enhanced capital resource position. This program is for economically disadvantaged people. If you have access to capital and you flush with funds for operating purposes, you're going to get SBA to pause and say, he's not a good applicant or she's not a good applicant, because they're not suffering from the absolute minimum criteria and the intent of this program. Get your 8A first and then go and apply for your loan. Don't do it in reverse.
Okay, so related question there is for a business that has not gone out previously to take out loans, but does have capital in the business, but perhaps the owner, it doesn't reflect on the owner's net worth and their tax returns. Is that, let's say hypothetical, business has $2 million cash in the bank. However, the owner's net worth and income reflects alignment with the 8A requirements. Is that should the business even bother to apply for 8A because they've accumulated some cash over time, or how does that play?
Well, again, I'm being redundant. You're asking some very good questions. Remember that total net worth cannot exceed $4 million. And if you have $2 million in the business, not part of your personal assets, and you meet the threshold of the financial requirements or economically requirements on the personal side, you okay. That's okay. It's challenging. I mean, you are in an enhanced position, and I don't urge you to try to duplicate that kind of profile. But as long as your total assets do not exceed $4 million and you're under the personal net worth threshold of $750,000, but you got $2 million in the business or on business account, you okay. That's okay. Now you're going to cause SBA to walk around the room a few times and scratch their heads and go, but that's a perfectly legitimate situation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Jesse, did you have another question? Okay.
No, I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay, all right. Doran, did you have another question as well?
No, sir. My hand is still up from earlier.
Okay.
I'm sorry about
All
that.
right. And Keena, you have a question? Ms. Kelly? Okay.
Yes, no, I don't have any other questions. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I couldn't find my mute.
Oh, your hand was still up. That's why.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I had to take it down.
No worries, no worries. So, I mean, Mr. Tulsa, you've done so well. It's like, I don't see any more hands up. So,
Well, you got me second guessing myself because I don't think I present that well. So,
well, when the information is crystal clear, and like I say, the challenge that we have, in the marketplace is just not understanding, how to, right? It's a good question that Ron is asking when it relates to capital, because like you said, it's for the disadvantage, right? But, a lot of us don't always know the right question to ask, right? Even if we're speaking to you. So a lot of times we try to put questions out, for the listening audience or the viewing audience, so that they have an opportunity to ask a question and just didn't think, how to ask the question. So, we always want to make this, a platform where you can ask questions. If you don't know some, there's nothing to be embarrassed about if you don't know the question or anything like that. But this is where you should come and where you should really hey, ask the questions that you think might be hard, or you think that, somebody else is next to you won't ask the same question. Just ask questions. So, Mr. Tolson, I don't know if you want to kind of, conclude with an overview or things that you think is most important for companies that are trying to become an 8A, certifying company, or just drop some other nuggets for some of the other vendors who, may not have asked the question.
well, I just want to, in my concluding remarks, will be dominated by just thanking you for making these kinds of forums available. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be able to connect. And I just want to thank you, and for those in the audience, I think you're going to put up my contact information in a
Yeah.
second too. And
Yeah.
for those who have some questions that you think of afterwards, please feel comfortable to email me or call me. You'll find out that we're pretty user friendly. And again, thanks to you for sponsoring.
Oh, yeah. I want to thank you so much, for your time, your knowledge, the time you've been in this space, all the nuggets you're dropping for everybody on the call. The one thing we'll do is we try to stay, systematic so that all the vendors and other vendors who are coming, Mr. Tosin, we'll try to route them to you. We'll try to also give, that 30-minute window where you can either understand that, hey, we want to drive companies to other companies to be able to service those companies who need the help.
Yeah.
So the one thing that we must do as, businesses, we got to learn how to recycle dollars with each other, right? Mr. Tosin's a business. He's probably top in the country at this. You guys, you ladies, we have to really understand how to recycle dollars with businesses that are coming through this PN community. That's the only way we're going to really sustain our own communities and help each company grow and scale. So I just kind of want to make sure that I reemphasize that. It's always about, retooling things, working with each other, asking questions, getting acclimated to certain things that's sometimes not so comfortable. But, that's why you're here, is to scale and grow, gain access to contracts or gain access to capital. So Mr. Tosin, again, I want to thank you so much, for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll get all information out. We'll schedule meetings, with Tosin Enterprise for all those who need that type of, toolage, that type of education, and also that type of person will help you scale your business in the 8A space or any other space. So we'll do that. Sonia, I don't know if you or LaRonda want to have any comments before we conclude this evening. LaRonda?
I was going to say thank you to Mr. Wilson again for your presentation and for everyone in attendance tonight.
LaRonda, you have anything?
No, I just thank you, Mr. Tolson, for the information. It was very educational for those who may be looking for SBA 8A certification.
Thank y'all. Again. Thank you so much.
I know for the sake of time, do we have anybody on the call that, want to make a comment? You've asked Mr. Tosin a question, but do you want to make a comment or you have any concerns or anything you want to voice before we actually conclude this evening? Just raise a hand. Well, Mr. Tosin, you're awesome. Everybody's good. Everybody's good. Listen, you should have businesses lined up to work with you.
I have a question. Tolson.
Okay.
What about for a company? What about someone that's new to this and they don't know what's out there regarding these 8A contracts? Are you open to consulting with them with regard to their skill sets and directing them in the direction they need to go?
Absolutely. In a word. Absolutely. That's what we do.
Yep. And that's why we want all companies to come to Tosin Enterprise so that you guys can get the right tools, the right knowledge, and learn how to scale. So this is for startup businesses, it's for growing concerned businesses, it's education with real people like Mr. Tosin. This is what this is all about. So continue to spread the word about this community so we can all uplift all our communities and own some things in our own communities too. That's what we need to do. We need to own a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, for everybody who joined the call, it's right at 7 and 8 o'clock East Coast time. And for the West Coast time is 5 p.m. So some of the West Coast has got to get some traffic, I'm quite sure. So I want everybody to have a great evening and a great weekend coming up. And let's get back on this next week. All right. Take care, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tosin.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks all.